we talked about solving quadratics. I believe we were completing the square the last time we met. We did the square root property. All right, I did a little bit of that completing the square root property. All right, and then I told you we would be taking a look at the quadratic formula. Okay, so that's the one we're going to do. For the most part, quadratic formula is very well liked and very well practiced, tons and tons and tons in high school. Okay, so the part that usually is left off when the formula is given to you in high school is x equals. All right, people never put x equals to begin with. They just automatically start with the negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, and like I said, this x equals is the part that is so often left off. We just think of, oh, that's the quadratic formula. All right, but stop and think about what you're doing here. Okay, we have an ax squared plus a bx. Let's go ahead and make them all capital. Bx plus a c equals 0. This is a quadratic equation, and it has x's in there. Our a and our b and our c, a and b are coefficients. That c is a constant. And when we use this formula on this equation, we are solving it. So technically, it really should be x equals all the way down. We just kind of, in doing it, we drop it. Okay. So in the past, I believe they have given you the quadratic formula on the final exam. So it's not something that you would have to have memorized, but many of you probably already do. Okay. So this is pretty much no more than plug and chug. So let's just jump right into this. All right. Directions are going to say solve because they are going to give you a quadratic equation in that form. Maybe something like an 8x squared plus a 2x minus a 1. Okay. From there, they are going to, or you should identify your A is 8, your B is 2, your C is a -1 right there. So once you know each of those values, then it's a matter of plugging it in here. Most of the time, I don't rewrite the formula. I just start plugging in right away. So this is negative b, so this would be a -2. Plus or minus the square root of, I plug in b again and I square it. I'm going to go ahead and show it. 2 squared minus 4 times the a value, which is 8, times the c value, which is -1. And then all over 2 times a. All right, if you plug it in like that and you don't do any math ahead of time, then you're clearly going to be able to see if you made a mistake by plugging in the wrong values. All right, some people will do a little bit of math in their head as they go along. They'll square that, they'll multiply this out, they'll multiply that. All right, that's obviously all personal choice. Okay, the plus or minus there indicates I am going to get 2 answers, right? But we knew that probably because there's a good possibility that when I sketch this parabola upright, upside down, all right, it's probably going to cross the x-axis in 2 places. Doesn't have to, all right, but we talked about that last week where it could just cross at 1, in which case you're still going to have the plus or minus there, but then something, you know, it could be 2 of the same answer that you're going to get. All right, so let's keep working this out here. -2, this is all arithmetic, plus or minus. All right, this would be 4. I'm going to show a lot of steps here. 4 times 8 times -1 would be a -32 with the minus. So it's going to be a minus a -32, which means what? We add 16 there on the bottom. So when we add those 2 things right there, we get a nice little 36. So -2 plus or minus square root of 36 all over 16. Now this one came out kind of nice because square root of 36 is a perfect square. All right, so your 2 answers, I'm going to break this into 2. All right, so your 2 answers, I'm going to write them separately just so you can see where they come from. A -2 plus the 6, I'm going to go ahead and take square root of 36 all over 16. And then my other one is -2 minus the 6 all over 16. All right, we can work this out. What this would be 4 over 16 or 1/4 for this one. This one's right here is going to be what? -8 on top over 16, reduced to the lowest term, -1/2. All right, so this one turned out nice. We've got 2 nice little answers right there. When you're in high school, you probably stopped right there. We're going to use that set notation. okay, for our answers. So -1/2, 1/4 for our set notation answer. Okay, could I plug those back in to verify that both of them are correct answers? Yes, I could. Probably should even. Okay, if you do always check your work, plug it back in, then you're going to know right away whether or not you're wrong or right. But again, you know, I didn't draw that to scale, but I knew it was going to be upright because it's positive. Okay, and I got lucky. One of them was positive, one was negative. So that's a pretty good sketch. All right, so I'm assuming we don't need a whole lot of practice on the ones that come out even. All right, they don't always have to come out even, and they don't all have to be in this form right here. Okay, that form right there, just to review from earlier, that's standard form for our quadratic. So in other words, the ax squared term and then the bx and the c was already on the left. All right, I would venture to say the number one drawback or mistake, common mistake, is when it's not in standard form, people just start plugging in a, b, c, and they don't pay attention to really what the variables are. Okay, so we'll take a look at one of those. Let's suppose instead of being in standard form, maybe they give you something as simple as a 2x squared equals a 4x plus a 1. All right, that is not in standard form, but it is still a quadratic because it has an x squared, but it's not in standard form. Okay, so I need to rewrite in standard form. That's going to be my first step. So basically what? Move everything to the left. All right, personal preference, I want that leading coefficient to be positive. It just makes life a whole lot easier. So I'm going to move the 4x to the left. I'm going to move the 1 to the left. So then it's going to look like 2x squared. I'm going to make sure that I write them in the order that I need them. So cross the equal sign, that's going to be a minus 4x. Cross the equal sign with this one, it's going to be a minus 1. All right. And like I said, the number one mistake or problem area is people try to use this for A, this for B, and this for C. These two would be the wrong values because if you use them when it's not in standard form, they're going to be the opposite sign. So at this point, my A is 2, my B is -4, and the C is -1. Okay. All right. So again, I'll write it over here so I only have to write once. -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, hopefully you have that all memorized. On that slim chance that they do not give it to you on the final exam, I would go ahead and have it memorized. All right, now this is -b, but my b is already negative. I'm going to show all the work. There's a negative in my formula. Then I'm going to replace it with a -b. Okay, which negative times negative is going to make that positive in my next step. B squared, I want my set of parentheses around the -4 for my b, and then square it, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times a -1. All right, all over 2 times 2, because 2 is a. All right, but this right here basically just changes the sign, a negative times a negative. So that'll give me a 4 plus or minus. This is going to be a 16, -4 squared is 16. Minusing a negative here, so this is going to turn it to a plus 8. All right, and 4 on the bottom. Okay, so 16 and 8 is like 24. All right, I'm going to go ahead and keep going across, I guess. Let's put that in a little bubble so we don't get confused. All right, so 4 plus or minus square root of, adding those two there, I get a 24. All right, now at this point, you might not want to, I've been like going across, you can go down, you can go across, it's not a big deal. All right, but right now, what you're going to need to do, square root of 24 is not a perfect square root. It's not a perfect square root. We do not want to grab a calculator, okay? We went through an entire chapter where we simplified those square roots. So that's what we need to do, okay? We need to take that, and I would do it somewhere in the margin of your paper, square root of 24. And then I would simplify it the way we did in our radical chapter. So we found the biggest perfect square that goes into 24, which I believe is 4, because the number is not too big. So square root of 4 times the square root of 6, which then means that simplifies down to a 2 radical 6. Okay, I definitely would not try to put this in this line of work here because it just clutters it up a little too much. Okay, which means then the square root of 24 is equivalent to 2 square root of 6. So I'm going to do 4 plus or minus 2 radical 6 all over 4. Okay, now at this point, we want to not just go crazy and start crossing things out. All right, technically, this is a binomial on top. If it's a binomial on top, for me to be able to legally cross things out, I need to factor the greatest common factor out. All right, so many people want to leave that step out. They just want to start crossing out. But if you do that, if you get in the bad habit of not factoring it out and you just start crossing it out, what's going to happen is maybe this number and this number is going to cross out, but this number won't. And so you'll still go ahead and cross those two out. And that's an illegal move. All right, or maybe this number and this number will cross out, but this won't. So if you get in the habit of just start crossing things out, you are going to screw up on this. Okay, so take out a greatest common factor on that top, which is going to be a 2. Factor a 2 out. Okay, if I factor a 2 out, this first term would leave me with the 2 here, plus or minus the 2 radical 6. I take out the 2. Radical 6 is the only thing I have left. And then the 4 on the bottom. Okay, that's going to then allow me to say, okay, 2 goes into 2 1 time, 2 goes into 4 2 times. All right, so we will have 2 plus or minus square root of 6 all over 2. All right, there's no reason to go to a decimal. We can leave it in radical form. All right, that's clearly 2 answers. Okay, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you just start crossing out, some people are going to try to cross those 2's out. And you cannot do that because it's got to be factored out. So it's got to come out of both terms, be factored out in front, and then cross things out. All right, if I am still going to use that set notation, okay, we definitely want to use the set notation whenever we have more than one answer. I clearly have 2 there. You would literally just write that entire thing inside a set of brackets. Okay, because this does indicate 2 numbers. I don't need to separate them and write them separately. I just go ahead and leave them together.